when you have the CEO of OpenAI consistently saying they're going to be billion-dollar companies with only 2 people, other CEOs hear that and go, oh, okay, hey, marketing, do what you did last year, plus grow the business 30%, plus cut your staffing by 30% or 50%. Literally, we have CMOs in our community whose CEOs have said, I think you should look at how you could cut staff by 50%. That's really hard. So managing those expectations, and what are we talking about? Are we talking short-term, long-term? Most are only looking at a quarter out, and that's a problem for CMOs.
Hello, and welcome to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm here with my co-host, Jason. And today our guest is Drew Neisser of CMO Huddles. Drew, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you, Drew.
Yeah, absolutely. So Drew, for anybody that might be unfamiliar with you and CMO Huddles, would you give us a little bit of an overview of what y'all do, and then share a little bit of the backstory about how it came to be?
Sure. I'm going to make some of it longer than it should be, and I'll make some of it shorter, and you're going to have to ask me more. But so basically, we bring B2B CMOs together to help each other thrive, not just survive. We call it, the toughest job in the C-suite. There's an important metaphor I need to share because you're going to see some penguins in the background. So a group of penguins is called a huddle. So, CMO huddles. And so the minute I found that out, we adopted penguins. And I have a question for you because this will really illustrate the power of huddles. What do you think the differential temperature is between being inside a penguin huddle in the Antarctica and outside it? Just take a wild guess. How many degrees do you think between the inside and the outside?
I'm going to go 20.
20, good guess. Josh, what's your guess?
I was going to say 20, but I'll say 15 just to be different.
Okay. 70 degrees is the differential.
Oh my God.
And in fact, I just read today that the temperature can get as high as 90 degrees inside the huddle. And so it's incredible that these birds can work together to help each other, not just survive, but actually thrive. And that's really what CMOs, the CMOs of CMO Huddles do. So this metaphor has proved us well. And just because we're not animal appropriators, I'm happy to tell you that we donate 1% of revenue to the Global Penguin Society, which is the leading organization that supports and helps penguins actually not just thrive, but survive. So, anyway, it's a fun part of it. And now I can answer more of your question, but I'll pause.
No, that's awesome. And one of the reasons I was so excited about having you on is because of what you do and the people you interface with. And I thought it could be sort of like a fun state of the CMO union, if you will. But before we dive into that, I'd love if you could also give our listeners a bit of an overview of your background and kind of what you did before you started CMO Huddles.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And again, I'll try to be brief. So I got to know CMOs through an organization called the CMO Club. That was about, now 20 years ago. The founder of the CMO Club was a 2-time client of Renegade Marketing, the agency I owned and ran for 30 years. And so as a way of ingratiating myself to the members, I just started interviewing them. And I had a column at First and Fast Company, and then a bunch of other media websites. And when I hit 100, it was time to write the first book. After about 200, I started a podcast. 400, I got to my second book. And when the founder sold the CMO Club to Salesforce on March 2nd, 2020, like the light bulbs went off for me. I knew absolutely that Salesforce would kill the club. And I also knew that the club was never that great for B2B marketers. So I took 18 or so of the members that I knew who were in B2B, and we started huddling April 1st, 2020, had the name CMO Huddles, and we met 55 times in that 6-month period. And they helped identify that, yes, there was a need for this. Of course, remember, that was the beginning of COVID. That was the beginning of Black Lives Matter. There was a lot going on in the world. And if ever there was a stressful time, there was work from home. So we really bonded. And it's amazing because fast forward 5 years, most of those 18 are still with us and are going to be at our super huddle in November. So anyway, it just shows you how bonded that initial group became.
That's really cool.
And by the way, I closed the Renegade, the agency, in 2022, both because I liked the business model of CMO Huddles better. And I felt for this point in time in my career, it was just a perfect thing to be able to do.
So from what you shared, you've been doing this for decades, like studying marketing as a practitioner, advising, connecting CMOs together. What first drew you into the world of marketing leadership, and how did that morph into community building?
Well, it's funny, as being part of that community of CMO club. And again, I wasn't a CMO. I was a guy who ran an agency, but I always wanted to add value. And the philosophy at our agency was service. What can you do that will help your customers? And so it was by interviewing these folks, what I found, again, after 100 or 200 of is, one, how hard the job was, two, how much empathy I had for them. And then sort of three, as just an advisor, I was kind of uniquely skilled to help them help each other. And that's a kind of a moment of epiphany when you can bring 10 CMOs together and you can help them have a really productive conversation. One, is very rewarding as an individual, but it's also great for them. And there's a lot that goes to this. This is a skill that one can develop, and having interviewed so many CMOs and without an agenda, I'm just trying to help them. That's it. Period. I mean, we joke at CMO Huddles, we have a 2-word business plan. It's called Help Huddlers. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you knew Salesforce was going to kill the previous community. What was the gap that you saw that wasn't being addressed by that previous community or others like it? And what has surprised you most about starting the community? Because obviously when you start something new, you're always thinking, oh, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. But then once you actually dive in, it tends to be different. So what surprised you most?
So let's first go back to the one thing that, as part of my role with the CMO Club, I was running the B2B curriculum at 5 of the last, 10 CMO Club summits. So I could never get main stage time because B2C always led. And I also knew that the B2B CMOs were starving for their own place to share. And what I came to appreciate, and this happened both as an agency person who at the time had both B2C and B2B and ended up focusing on B2B for the last 10 years of the agency, is they're different. And, you're going to hear lots of people, and I have a lot of friends who will say there's no B2B or B2C, there's just human to human. And honestly, it's just not true. There's a big difference between selling a pack of gum and an enterprise software. There is, and you just have to recognize those differences. And so knowing that we were recognizing those differences, we could and by the way, on the side, we started B2C huddles, and every conversation was just about media and spend, how efficiently you're buying CPMs. And that was a conversation. It was hard to get them off of that. So we did a little bit of that and realized, it doesn't really work for them. Whereas with B2B CMOs, there's always very specific, like, you want to talk tech stack? We could go deep on that. You want to talk budgeting? You want to talk about metrics? What does the leadership look like? And in some of these things, whether they're either product led or sales led, there's so much consistency in terms of the challenges they face. And what's fascinating, and this was one surprise, was initially we thought we were going to segment by business size, and we'd have, large businesses and medium and smaller and startups. And what we learned very quickly was that was unnecessary and not even helpful. And the reason was that there are a number of members of our community who specialize in startups and exits. And those folks are so skilled and so nimble. They bring a tremendous amount of value to the billion-dollar companies. And so mixing them up. The other thing, I guess you could say is a surprise. We thought, well, maybe, we'll have to do a SaaS group and we'll have to do a manufacturing group because they are different. But again, when you're talking about leadership, when you're talking about metrics, when you're talking about brand versus demand, the common things are more important than the dissimilarities. And we just didn't know that was the way it was going to be.
Yeah. And as you've talked to all of these CMOs from a wide range of industries and stages, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different takes on how marketing's evolved, especially over the last couple of years. If you had to describe the current state of marketing in one word or phrase, what would it be and why?
Harsh would be the word. And I want you to visualize the Antarctica because that's the kind of, when I talk about this being a harsh and maybe hostile environment for CMOs, it has gotten worse in the last 5 years, not better. And you can link that. And I ran about PE firms all the time, but I'm going to give you a fact that'll kind of blow you away, which is the average tenure of a CMO at a PE-backed firm is 17 months. The average tenure of a CMO at a Fortune 500 company is 4 years. In B2B, when you have 17 months, those CMOs don't even get through one sales cycle on an enterprise thing. So it's harsh. And so and there's just so much, and the problem is related to expectations, how quickly marketing can transform an entire organization. Oh, new marketer, boom, they'll wave a magic wand and poof, our sales problem will be over. And so it's a hard one to fight, but it's wearing CMOs down. So yeah, harsh is, and then, so I also want to counterbalance that by saying this is the most exciting moment in marketing in a long, long time.
Okay. We need you to unpack that.
Yes. Okay. So there are things that CMOs can do now that they could never do before. And one of the things we're wrestling with is like, if you have a small company, you're just going all in on AI. You're not having to get IT approval. You are building agents to help you create a team of 20, but there's only 2 of you. You're a $1 billion company. You have a team of 100, and now you're trying to figure out what do you do. I think it's actually harder for the company with an installed base because you want to take a fresh look at your org chart. And I'm absolutely convinced org charts will change dramatically in the next 2 years. And it will change because, again, let's just make this world simple for a moment and say, CMOs they basically have people, they have programs, and they have technology, and they have to find that optimal balance to succeed. Well, right now, the technology is creating an opportunity to have efficiencies. I don't know yet about effectiveness, but efficiencies alone, whether it's language translation, whether it is simply taking a workflow that used to take 35 man hours. And I don't know about you, but our podcast used to take 10 hours per episode. Now it takes 2 thanks to Descript. So it's crazy, right? So multiply that across a bunch of areas. So technology is about to transform the other aspects of programs and people. And I don't yet know. And like I write a 500-word rant every single week that goes out on Saturday. And some of these have been wildly viral. And the only ones that have not done well are the ones where I use the bot to help me. I mean, it's crazy. So I have some concern on the effectiveness, but nonetheless, let's say you have a great piece of research, an original piece of research, and every marketer should. You could take that now, original research, and slice it and dice and do your iterations in what would have taken weeks, and now you do it in minutes, right? And that's all good. And that's all original content. So you've got exciting things happening on your program front. You've got incredible things happening on the tech front. And of course, then there's AEO or whatever you want to call it, AEO, GEO, EIEIO, I don't know, call it whatever you want. How you show up in an LLM matters. And it really matters because site traffic is down to the majority of websites across the world because of them.
Yeah, I love the way that you're kind of framing the opportunities there for efficiency. Backtracking a little bit, going back to kind of unpack what the harsh environment looks like and what's going on there. What's keeping the CMOs that you talk to up at night right now?
I think we could use the word short-termism to capture a lot of the challenges that they face. Again, let's say you're at a PE-backed firm and they're in the third or fourth year of that thing. All they care about is EBITDA, and it's like quarterly. So that's a problem. If you're at a public company, obviously closing matters. And here's an interesting nuanced thing, but that came up recently in a call. So you as a CMO are supposed to be thinking about this quarter, and you're supposed to be thinking about long term. So you build if you will, a demand funnel, and you bring in all these folks, and you have these wonderful stage 3 opportunities, and sales is ignoring them. And why is sales ignoring them? Because sales only cares about this quarter, and those deals aren't going to close this quarter. So short-termism, even forget the PE firm, even on your salespeople, has a big impact on, if nobody's paying attention to those opportunities, which they've all agreed are great, you have a problem. So that's a part of this thing. And then you can sort of step back and say, well, what is short-termism? And in its, the real problem is expectations and managing expectations. So, and what's crazy is, when you have the CEO of OpenAI consistently saying they're going to be billion-dollar companies with only 2 people, other CEOs hear that and go, oh, okay, hey, marketing, do what you did last year, plus grow the business 30%, plus cut your staffing by 30%. Or 50%. Literally, we have CMOs in our community whose CEOs have said, I think you should look at how you could cut staff by 50%. That's really hard. So managing those expectations, and what are we talking about? Are we talking short-term, long-term? Most are only looking at a quarter out, and that's a problem for CMOs.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I love that articulation of that tension. Because I often think about it as, and we have talked about it a lot, as the tension between, long-term brand building content and, conversion-oriented content. But it's interesting to see what you're observing even about like how the sales pressure on the sales side of that equation, affects even the deals that are pursued and nurtured properly.
It's funny. So we're comfortable using the word brand, but one of the posts that went viral on LinkedIn is, and all of those start with a quote that's real, is my CEO said I can never use the word brand again. And it's so problematic. And so literally, one, we've created something we are calling a reputation tracker that we're creating for the members of our community. But 2, we're encouraging them to use the word reputation because everybody gets reputation. If you are an individual and you have a bad reputation, you're not going to get into that country club you wanted, right? I mean, there's personal impact of having a poor reputation, and they can understand that. And so literally we had to change the vocabulary. 2, we have to say, never put something called brand in your budget, ever. You have to avoid that. You have to talk about campaigns that are associated with certain overall revenue goals. And yeah, somewhere in there, there's going to be, we're targeting XYZ segment, right? Here's the segment. We're going to do a multi-channel campaign against this segment. And part of that will be, you know what? We need social proof, and that's analysts. So we're going to spend some money on analysts. We need social proof because we're going to show up in G2 and Trust Radius. So they're going to do those things, which, by the way, are longer term, sometimes go under that budget of brand. We're going to do PR because we know that our segment reads these publications, right? But if you call it brand, you don't get the budget. But if you call it a campaign, you can get budget against a particular revenue goal. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of games that CMOs have to play right now to help themselves survive and thrive in this harsh environment.
Yeah. And you're touching on this, but what are the specific shifts you're seeing there in how CMOs define and measure success now that is different than the way they were doing it even 12 to 18 months ago?
I wish it was different, and I wish I was seeing more. I think, first of all, there's a vast variety in terms of how measurement, what matters. I mean, even there's still battles on attribution and, do we do first touch, last touch, or multi-touch? And as the CMO said today, we're going to need a lot more brown liquor to get through that one, which I love. But so you have issues of attribution already when it comes to measurement, and they're not going away. So I think what we encourage our CMOs is to work with their CFOs to get to metrics that matter, that we've defined it in the way that both the CFO understands. And it could vary by CFO because like where they put dollars could matter too, to how you budget. So I'm a little bit all over the place, but the point is there isn't a clear metric. Like if you talk to a PE firm, they're going to say, I want to know what your cost per acquisition is divided by your lifetime value of your customer. And that's the magic number. Okay. That doesn't work for everybody. And who's calculating the cost per acquisition, and who's determining the lifetime value, and how long are we calling lifetime value, and where does that fit? So there are people who will be very prescriptive, and the PE firms will define whatever the metrics are that they matter. They've got a rule of 40. They've say, you know what, 25% of sales and marketing are going to go into 25% of revenue is going to go into marketing, and marketing marketing sales is 25%, and marketing gets 7% of that. Period. End of story. Which is kind of stupid. It's just as bad, because if you say your budget's 7%, why? So 7% to do what? It's just an arbitrary number, right? So it's a complicated world, and honestly, there haven't been enough innovations when it comes to measuring effectiveness, because if there were, CMO tenure would improve.
You touched on budgets a few minutes ago. And when we were talking a couple of weeks back, we were sort of commiserating with what seems to be a trend right now, which is everyone's kind of dealing with this do more with less dynamic, right? Everyone's trying to navigate that. What are you seeing as like a common thread amongst the CMOs that are navigating that dynamic well? Like, what are they doing differently than other folks?
I'm going to answer this in two different ways. So the first way is, there's an irony here that I've seen successfully work over and over again. We call it the CMO plus. And the idea is, if a CMO is responsible for another aspect of the business, they get a seat at the table like a leader of the organization as a business person, as opposed just the marketer. So Sandy Ono, Open Text CMO, is the head of marketing and the head of partnerships. And so I say to Sandy, hey, what do you talk about with what's your CEO want to talk to you about? He wants to talk about partnerships because it's revenue. So because he understands partnership, never really understood marketing to begin with. So part one of this is helping CMOs demonstrate their leadership capabilities and to drive and to be leaders of the organization, not just marketers. So that's part one of that, so that they're not just being measured by pipeline, which has lots of factors into it, because marketing doesn't control product necessarily. They might control product marketing. They don't control customer service sometimes, right? So they got to sort of take what they have and do the best they can with it. And most of the time, companies have go-to-market problems, not marketing problems. Okay, so now we can drill down, and how are they actually doing more with less? It's, again, maybe AI is going to be different. Maybe. And I say that because there are a lot of CMOs are really piloting a lot of different things, and they are finding efficiencies in getting this stuff out. We are still uncertain whether it's effective. Like, more content isn't better. More better content is better, right? So this is a challenge right now. So if there is a solution to more with less, AI will play a role, and a huge one. And a lot of the CMOs in our community are leaning heavily into it. They're training their staffs. They're having competitions on ideas that can help drive the business using AI. They're often in the leadership role. This is another way they're leading, is they're driving AI implementations across the whole organization because they were the first to adopt it. So, but ultimately you do run out of, I joke is you get to the point where it's, how do you make more out of nothing? Right. And I'm sure you've seen, and this happens. It's like, oh, you have zero budget, but go hit your number. It's just, those are impossible. That's magical thinking.
Yeah. On the AI front, you touched on AEO and the important place that has now in any marketing function. We've seen a lot of conversation in particular around and you mentioned site traffic being down, pretty much around the world. With that overall trying to make sense of how SEO has been disrupted by LLM search and so on. How do you see, the best CMOs thinking about that shift?
So just for fun, in one of our live streaming shows 2 weeks ago, one of the CMOs, actually she fessed up, name was Kelly Hopping from Demand Base. She said, I think AEO is a load of crap. And her point was that if you just are doing what you should have done all along and doing best practices for SEO, chances are you're going to do pretty well with the AEO. And the good news about that was that really sparked a lot of conversation in the community. And maybe she's right 80%, but there's 20% that really does matter in this thing. And the smart marketers are doing things that are right for their customers that happen to be AEO friendly. And I can give you an example. You come to a website, you want to have the answers to the questions that people have. And so you can make sure that every possible question that someone could ask is in your FAQ, and you do it in a long form basis versus a short one. That's just being smart. If you want to take it up another level, you have like an LLM driven bot that like weblist.ai, which will pull all the answers from your website and be right there to solve that. So that's part of it. So that's one example. Another example is bots don't read gated content very well. Well, consumers hate and customers hate gated content. So ungate your content so the LLMs can read it and source it. So that's another thing that's just smart marketers want to be customer friendly. Now, and I think there's one, have content that your prospects and customers want to read. Another sort of basic thing is everybody wants pricing information. Everybody wants competitive information. If you don't put that on your site, the LLM will create it somewhere other way. So you might as well try to control it. So those are some basic things that would be smart to do under any circumstance. Probably the thing that some CMOs have seen success and have mattered is schema, and going through your website and adding some code that, and this is beyond my technical know-how, although I've gone in and created it because there are very easy tools to create schema. It has some impact because the LLMs can find the content that you have. So there's technical aspect of it, just like there is SEO. But I think, again, step back to what Kelly Hopping said, create great content. That would have been a smart thing to do 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago. It still is. And it's original, and it has to be original. And this is, again, my point about when I write something and it's 99% human except for the Grammarly checks, it does better. And it does better sometimes because it's flawed, but it does better. And so you better be creating content for humans. I'm not saying it has to be by humans, but it better be run through humans.
Yeah, that's good. Just as a brief aside, I've sort of noticed that there's an interesting thing happening right now, which is it seems like everyone kind of wants the credit for building the perfect workflow that includes AI, but also doesn't want to be found out to be using AI for their own content creation. Have you noticed that?
Yes. And it's funny because I fess up every piece that I write, and I ask our team to do what percentage of it was AI written roughly. And so certainly on my blog posts, I do, what percentage it was. And we're on my LinkedIn rants. But we should be doing that on the blog. I think people should be putting on there and owning it. I don't know if it will matter to anybody. Again, if your information is presented in a way that, look, if you're just regurgitating what everybody else thought, it's useless. Don't bother. But again, this is why if you have original research or you've interviewed your CEO and they have a very specific point of view, and sure, if you use AI to help take that transcript and turn it into a blog post or a newsletter, great, fine. It's going to include original quotes, and hopefully you have a good GPT that enables the voice to be right. You might be fine. The workflow thing is different, though. I want to make sure that because I do believe that that's, at least in the short term, where these economies of scale are going to come in. We just did a workflow project. We worked with an agency to help us build thing because there's something that we do 5 times a month, actually more than that, more like 20 times a month, recording calls with various groups of people. And those have to go somewhere. And right now, all of that was done manually. And so it was probably, I don't know, I think we added it up, but 75 different human touches. And now it happens automagically. That's so cool. And you could do that at scale if you are looking at, and I do know CMOs who are asking their team to benchmark the things that they do over and over again. Right? So we produce campaigns. Okay, how many people are involved? What's the approval process like? How do we do it? We have outreach to existing customers. What's that look like? How are we monitoring? Where's that data going? What are we learning from it? People record gone calls. Then what? There's a lot of places where that data could go. And so I think that's probably the most exciting part about AI is the workflow possibility. Because then I'm not necessarily completely worried about, is the content. How many times you go searching for a file and you don't know where it is? Multiply that by the number of employees, by the number of days in the week. Workflow automations should help solve those problems.
In terms of, we talked about what's challenging about this current environment. What are we seeing kind of on the flip side in terms of what's working besides, figuring out AEO? Sometimes we'll talk about this with guests, and sometimes you'll see posts, and sometimes it can be challenging to really understand like what is really working versus like what's a contrarian take that sounds cool. But like from the people you're talking to right now, like what are you seeing get traction?
There are some commonalities, and it's really interesting. So before COVID, roughly 50% of B2B marketing dollars went into events. Then that number went to not quite zero because they started to have virtual events, right, in COVID. And then physical events came back with a fury in 2003 and 4. The problem was the cost went up 30, 40, 50%, right? Everything went up. And so suddenly the number of events that you could do or the participation. But what's interesting to me is events are working again under certain circumstances. So in why are they working? Well, if you late stage deals, if you can get actually a face-to-face with a late stage deal and you can get them in a room with 3 other customers and they hear how good it is and they sort of overcome their fears, boom, you close that deal. And events are really good for doing that. Or that event could have been a roundtable dinner conversation that you had where you had some customers and prospects and brought them together again, either to move that deal along or to introduce them to it. So that's a sort of true through line where people are struggling are big events, big conferences, and they're looking at those as a net new revenue opportunity. That's really hard. The cost per acquisitions don't work very well. So unless you have we're going to do this because there's reputational opportunity here, there's PR opportunity here, there's late stage deal opportunity, there's customer service opportunity, and there's net new opportunity, and you put it under that, then you can justify it. But I do know a lot are cutting back on their bigger programs. So that's one area. In terms of other sort of outliers, depending on the category, believe it or not, direct mail is one of those outliers that I know a number of CMOs. And again, you have to have really good lists. This is all about if you have a good, customer target and segment, and you really understand them, and you send them a high impact direct mail piece that they can't ignore. It's amazing how, and again, it's not often a cold thing. It's more like, I'm going to move this thing along. I've met you, but I couldn't figure out how to move it along. You send something that surprises them, they take your call.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's interesting how that direct mail, physical gifts, in-person thing is such a, I think, refreshing counterbalance to being saturated and hammered over the head every day with AI and so forth. That it just seems like an emerging, I don't want to say like new trend, right? It's kind of this like throwback.
Right. No, it's ironic. I do think, and there was a famous futurist, Alan Toffler, who in the 60s wrote a book about it. And he said, the more things become high tech, the more you need high touch, and this sort of counterbalance. And I think that we're feeling that a lot. It's funny, there are other things the CMOs are looking at right now that are less about driving top of the funnel or anything, but how they manage their customer conversations. And AI has a big role here to play. I mean, the whole notion, do we have SDRs or do we have bots that do it better? That's an interesting area because this gets a little wonky, but philosophically stick with me for a second because there's an interesting insight in here. I firmly believe that CMOs should own the SDR function in order to qualify the folks that are coming into the door. And then when they actually hand it over to sales, it is a real opportunity that everybody agrees on in a written definition. And if you don't have that under marketing's control, then what you have is a handoff that's premature and sales just said, this lead sucks, forget it, go away. And you have no credibility. So Then once the CMO controls that, they can now test digital, bot-driven SDRs, and a lot of them are doing it, and a lot of them are having success with it. So that's an exciting thing because again, that frees up budget. Has the same function. I mean, it's not exciting if you want to be an SDR for a career, and it will have long-term implications for where your salespeople are going to train. But that's an area. And I think the other thing that is universal to right now is, what are you doing to use this technology to get to know your customer and prospects better? Right? And so this is, again, it's a little wonky. It's not exciting stuff like, oh, we're doing outdoor or direct mail or whatever, but using the calls that you have and analyzing the calls that you have and creating digital GPTs as sales enablement things and creating GPTs of your top personas so that the sales guys can query and practice, creating, used to be you'd write objection cards and so forth. Well, now you can do that in real time, and you can have a little bot sitting right next to the salesperson and helping. Those are exciting things that will make marketing a lot more effective and a lot more measurable, because everybody along the way, one, they'll be telling the same story in theory, and two, they'll be doing it better. And you'll know pretty quickly, because if you put this information in there and you've recorded the calls, after 100 calls, the GPT can analyze the whole darn thing and say, nope, that was the wrong story, or that was fantastic in these 30 calls. So I think we're going to get a lot smarter about our customer. And what I value about that, and I'm sure you do too, is like, if you're going to run advertising to me, I don't mind if it's for something that I really like. And if you give me that. And so similarly, if you know me well enough, and not in a creepy way, that you can add value and deliver information that I need when I need it, you're my friend.
So within the community at CMO Huddles, you've touched on a few of these, right? Like first touch, last touch, multi-touch attribution. Where should the SDRs sit? How do we, what should we actually be measuring in the first place? What are the other recurring debates or topics that you see coming up just again and again through any market?
I got a little, so we talk about big M marketing and little M marketing, and I spent a lot of time on little M marketing, all that stuff of SDRs and funnel. And that's, to me, little M marketing, where the debates is what's big M marketing look like? And big M marketing is the CMO being a leader. And how do they get to be a leader? So if we look at the things that are impediments to that, it's like when a CMO reports to a CRO, who's a salesperson who has no marketing experience. That's a problem. And it's a problem for the CMO because they don't have enough time with the executive, the C-suite. They don't have enough time to influence strategy. They're not a voice in the ear of the CEO and the CFO. And so, and there isn't, if you're a marketing person who became a CRO, which is less than 1 in 10, you get it, you're fine. But that doesn't happen. They put a really good salesperson, make him head of sales, and then they make him a head of, and literally, I was talking to a CMO today who said, my boss firmly admits he knows nothing about marketing. Well, what the? And that, by the way, is true with CEOs, but I still want CMOs reporting to CEOs, or at least a COO. And so that's one big issue out there, is reporting structure on a leadership level. Another big thing is, how do we measure the short term and long term? Right, that's a big issue. And do we just accept the metrics that we're given? Do we ever get to show them reputation over time and why that matters? And so we're working on a lot of things to elevate the profession and elevate the thing. It's so funny because in B2C, marketer has a seat at the table. I mean, and you look at Procter & Gamble, most of the CEOs came up through product marketing. And the difference is the product marketer owns a P&L. They own those things. CMO doesn't own a P&L. So again, if they're lucky, they have some e-commerce and they can own that. And it's amazing, if they have e-commerce, they are perceived differently. So it's up to the CMO to try to find a way to be perceived as as a marketing leader. And that comes with educating, working with a CFO, learning the language of business, speaking to the CFO and understanding how they look at things. And there is a lot of education that they have to do, and it's tiresome. And if you ask what trend is, I know a lot of really effective CMOs who've been worn out by this job. And that makes me that makes me sad. I want to blame PE firms for this. I can't blame them 100%, but at least 70.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that, certainly. So I'm curious, as someone that's built a community, you've had it for almost 6 years now. What's one of the lessons you've learned about fostering like an actual community where people come and bring their honest selves to those communities, and they're having, more vulnerable exchanges? Like what's like one of the big takeaways you've had from what that's been like?
I really appreciate this question, and because I will tell you that I don't think I necessarily had those answers 5 years ago when actually you're right, it's about 6, or we're moving into our 6th year when we started. But I had an idea because I had done a lot of roundtables for the CMO club over the years. They had an awards, and I'd always managed the roundtable, and it was amazing to me how these CMOs would open up with each other if it felt like it was a safe environment. And so one of the things that we do in our peer huddles, which is when we have anywhere from 5 to 12 CMOs on a specific topic, and we do this virtually or we do it in person, is they feel safe. And that's really important. And so, we talk about Chatham House rules and what that means every time. And we're also really careful about who we let into the community, because they have to understand the rules. They have to be trustworthy. They can't be selling their particular, and you usually can sniff that out. So a safe space is one. Another thing that I didn't expect to happen is how much therapy goes into this, and how having a CMO hear another CMO, oh, my CEO just said this, is so relieving, because they often think it's only them because there's no one else they could talk to in their company. So there's the therapy aspect of it. And I think one of the challenges right now is that the speed of technology changing, and there's a feeling that you're falling behind. And so if there was a third area that we've kind of stepped into, because we do these things called bonus huddles and career huddles where we bring in best-selling authors, is how do we help them keep up? And to the extent that, and I think I can argue, so we send out a recap every Friday. The open rate of those recaps is 74%, which is kind of amazing, which says we are providing information that they feel is valuable enough in their hundreds of emails that they will actually open up and read, which is, one, highly rewarding, and two, says they are curious and thirsty. They want to see what others are doing, and they want a sense of whether or not they're behind.
So if you were advising a new CMO stepping into their first role, first gig as chief marketing officer today, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd give to them?
So it's funny that you should ask that question, because we just started a mentor program where we match a first-time CMO with a four-time CMO. And the one thing that a first-time CMO doesn't necessarily bring to the table is confidence. And because how do they have that? I mean, I haven't done this job before, and there's so much to be thrown at them. And so the source of confidence, it comes from knowing how to handle those first 90 days. We actually have a first 90 days quick wins checklist because a lot of the first 90 days is about establishing your credibility so that you can make the big changes. And this is probably the biggest advice that I have is look for some small, quick wins to buy the time that you need to not just learn the business, but to build the relationships that you're going to need to actually change things significantly, right? You know, spending a little more on PPC or doing a little bit more. Or the big mistakes that first-time CMOs make is they say, oh, we have a brand problem, and they throw away everything that the last CMO did. And it's like, oh, the last CMO must have been stupid because they're not in the chair anymore. And that is a horrendous waste of their time and all of the political capital that they have. I mean, and you know, if you're going to change the brand, you better have a brand new product and a new target to go after. Otherwise, it's, you know, coat of paint on an old barn.
Yeah, man, that's so interesting. And it's almost cliche at this point, right? Like I think you know, that's what CMOs are kind of known to do is the second they get on board a new company, it's like, let's rebrand. And sometimes it makes sense, but not always.
It's so expensive and so time consuming and so distracting when it may be the problem. And it's quite possible, yes, that, you know, your brand looks exactly like and talks like everything. But behind that is, are you really positioning? Have you changed the positioning enough to truly be differentiated? And positioning often comes from a substantial change, either because of the product, you know, something's changed. You've merged. You've decided, oh, we've completely rebuilt our product because of AI. So fix the positioning, which often means fix the product, then rebrand, because then you have you have news, real news, not, hey, we're blue instead of red.
What about in terms of like the skill set / mindset? You touched on confidence that will separate in the future the best marketers, the best marketing leaders from the rest of the pack.
You know, I think the best marketers instinctively know what good leaders do. I mean, leadership can be really broken down into a few things. I mean, you build a team, you sort of set the direction. That's one. Right? What's the vision? 2, you build the team, make sure you have those A players that you talked about, and C, you allocate resources. Those are the 3 jobs. And assuming you do those well and, you know, market them internally. And I think this is what some CMOs are really good at is marketing the marketing. In all the ways that means in that building consensus on how we got here. Because, like, you know what, classic rebrand, they don't have the CEO buy in on it and it dies because the CEO finally sees it and goes, what are we doing here? Right. So you have to build consensus around a big idea and differentiate. And that's not news to anybody, but in B2B, it's remarkable how little energy goes into true differentiation.
Yeah, that's really good. Drew, this has been awesome. I can't wait to push this episode live. For people that want to learn more about you, that want to learn more about CMO Huddles, where's the best place to find you all online?
So you can find me, Drew Neisser, on LinkedIn. I publish a lot. And on CMOHuddles.com, you can find out about CMO Huddles if you're a B2B marketing leader. And then we also still publish a lot of content on like my podcasts and so forth on renegademarketing.com, where there's a lot of a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to. And we push out a lot of content based on all these conversations that we have with CMOs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thanks, Drew.
Hey, guys, thank you. I know how hard it is to produce a good podcast, so thank you for having me and doing what you do.
Yeah. Thanks again.